my friend. Today, we're going to talk about extension chords. Now, extended chords are going to allow you to take your normal chords that you know, like a 1, 3, 5, and then put another note with it, and then put other notes after that. I'm going to explain the best way possible how we can get from one point of knowing a few notes to knowing all the notes. All we're going to do is we're going to start off in a key. We're going to talk about what forms a chord or a triad or what we would call a tertiary harmony. These things are made up of harmonies. As you know, the word harmony means to take two notes, play them at the same time. Another term for that is dyad. So if we played A and G together, we would be playing two notes of a scale or a chord. When you play two notes together, those two notes should fit together in some fashion. If you find that those triads aren't your root, third, and fifth, and that you have another note replacing one of the notes, or you have another note in addition to the note, it allows us to see how to build everything and stack things in thirds. So, before we jump right into that, I just want to make sure we have a little background music theory. So, if you already know this, see you later. If this is brand new to you, I hope you enjoy and ask questions. The whole point of doing this is to have fun and to help those who are just starting have a little bit of vocabulary, know what questions to ask and when to ask them. So, first things first, we're going to start off with defining what our 1, 3, 5 is. When we talk about chords or key signatures, we are talking about a group of 7 sharps and a grouping of 7 flats. These are called accidentals. When we don't use an accidental, it's called a natural. When we have a sharp, we are augmenting by a half step. Meaning, when you hear something that only has something like this, that distance in music is called a minor second. It is the smallest amount of space in between two notes, at least in the Western ear. In the Eastern, we have microtonal. There are different notes in between. We'll talk about that at another time. Right here, we're going to put the D for diminished. Whenever we flatten anything, we are doing the same thing. We are flattening it by a half step, meaning rather than going up, we can go down. A great observation to notice is when we play all white keys, we can stack those notes tertiarily by putting a 1, 3, 5. What we're doing is defining what keys have what notes. C major has no flats or sharps. It's not one of the 7 sharps. It's not one of the 7 flats. It's kind of the key that we try to teach from, because when we start writing out the notes, let's say we have a C major. We would define this as having a root note as a C on the bass. We would skip a D note and play the bottom line of the treble clef, the E, skip the F, and play the G. That's the namesake of the treble clef, meaning when we draw a treble clef, if we get rid of the top half, we are left with the lowercase consonant of a G. That is what this line is. So when counting anything, that's kind of your first thing you learn as your home base. Second thing you really learn is where middle C is. If you're playing piano, you're going to play it right here, right in the middle. If we go all the way down towards the end, anytime we find 2 notes and then go down a half step, we achieve a C. So C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, C8. The fun about this is, whenever we play these notes and we have time to see that the circle of fifths itself can generate the tones in the family chords, we find that knowing that C to G is a fifth away. Here's that C4 we were talking about. Here's this G. So when we play them together, this makes a chord called a C5, or a perfect fifth. The only other thing we're really looking to do is put that major third or a minor third in there. Reason being, that would then generate something we call tertiary harmony. The bottom interval being a major third and the top interval being a minor third. And notice how on the major third I put a capital M and a lowercase 3, I guess, no, standard size. And then when moving over to here and playing the minor third, I put the tiny m and then a higher M. When we're talking about moving notes and finding them in order, we stack according to 7 notes. In the Western ear, we call this the diatonic scale. Reason being, the aforementioned chord, dyad, or the aforementioned chord, G5, forms just the 1 and just the 5. It omits the major or the minor third. So the idea behind this is, when we get into defining what a triad is, we have 4 different types of triads. Our stacking equals a major, which would be a major third and a minor third. We have a minor, which is a minor third, then a major third. We have a diminished, which is a minor third and a minor third. And then we have an augmented, which is a major third and a major third. Now, we could manipulate these with different notes. That's kind of what we're going to talk about today. That makes extended chords, and it uses just the base chords of 1, 3, 5, 1 flat 3, 5, 1 flat 3, flat 5, and then 1, 3 sharp 5. All of those look differently. When we draw them out, we would have this as being our C major. We don't have to put this. This would represent in a major chord that you wanted to add the addition of the major 7th. When we play this, you can put this. That signifies you wanted to play C major 7. Well, if we use our circle of fifths to say C to G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, G, A, B, C, D. When we go around and say D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, we go all the way around our circle and find all 7 sharp keys by just going 5 notes from the prime. Here's the prime, the root, the foundation, the tonic, the number 1, the happiest chord in the world, C major. C, E, and G, when we go out a full shaka, we are going to be throwing it out here, skipping our minor second. That is not correct. Our minor second, minor third, major 4th, minor 6th, and very special, our diminished 7th. Hence, minor 3rd, minor 3rd. So if you're with me thus far, what we're seeing is this circle of fifths having a multitude of different really cool things that we could do. We could go the other way and diminished. This way, we call it the circle of fifths because we're going in steps of perfect fifths. When we go the other way, we're calling it force because we are going in perfect force. We call these P for perfect. So the names of these would be something along the lines of tonic. I know you heard me call it prime. When you tonicify any note, meaning you make that 1 the tonic, you could change G to the tonic. Now we're in the key of G. G has 1 sharp. That sharp is F sharp. F and C are the 2 sharps in the key of D. F, C, and G are the 3 sharps in the key of A. F, C, G, and D are the 4 sharps in the key of E. F, C, G, D, A are in B. The next 6 are in F sharp, and then all of these are in the key of C sharp. So when we go through, we would say C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Let's hear if we can hear that note though. C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. B, C sharp, D sharp. When we go through these, we can hear that all of these notes correlate with adding on another sharp. So through the eyes of C, when we see that we go 4 notes this way, we can tell immediately that we do not have an A flat in the key of C. The reason being, when we go through writing all of our flats out, seeing the three of them share enharmonic qualities that we just visualized, but we can keep going. C, D, E, F. F flat most definitely is an E. When we go here, B double flat most definitely is an A. So the only other two pieces of information we would need to add on is this symbol. Remember, these are called accidentals. And then the next one will be called a double flat. Bigger B, little b. Beep, 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 beep. So 5 states of being, that takes these notes to having just a note, which is, let's say, a C, which sounds like this. And then we could sharpen that, so we could have a C sharp, right? That would sound like, if we wanted a C double sharp, it would sound like this. That means we are playing C, C sharp D, or C, D flat D. There is not a triple flat, but to analyze music, it is rare, but you will see calculations that have triple flats. Even though they are not used in standard music, they are an observation tool. Is it something that exists? Yes. Is it something that is utilized or taught? Not really. The Royal Academy talks about how you can use the understanding of triple flats to define things enharmonically so they retain the notes that would be made up. If we were playing in a hypothetical key like F flat, not really going to want to play an F flat. I'm going to want to play an E major. However, if we were to go through the process of seeing that, when we're starting to do stuff like diminished chords, we would have something that would have a 1, flat 3, and flat 5. Well, the way to get it diminished is a double flat 7. On some of these that are already called a flat, like if your flat note is a flat note, you would have to flatten it, which makes it a double flat, and then you would have to have another flat, which would make it hypothetically a triple flat. But we would just rename it as another note because note names at that point just don't mean anything. So here, if we were to make this chord, we would look at this and say to ourselves, what are the notes in the key of C major? C, E, and G makes the 1, 3, and 5. That is our standard major triad. Tertiarily, we have a major third and then a minor third. So to receive G to B, what we would be doing is we would be going from these notes, and then G, it would give us a major third because it is formed by playing minor second, minor second, minor second, minor second. This gives us a major third. By being able to see that we've got, By being able to see that we've got this broad range of notes, we find ourselves being able to layer in additional notes. Now here's where it gets fun and tricky and hard and awesome and groovy, and I hope you dig this. It takes many people a long time to figure this out. It takes other people just a quick second. I'm going to try to explain it the best way possible. If you are watching this live and you have a question about how this all goes down, please ask. All right, here we go. If we were to add just the major 7, what we're looking at right here is the B. That has completed our chord now of having the stacking of C, E, G, and B. Meaning, when we play these notes, we get a C major 7. Very cool. If you played above middle C, that's what it looks like on the clef. If you play it below middle C, that's what it looks like on the clef. You don't have to play them straight tertiarily. You can even play something along the lines of, that works to be a C major with an E in the bass. This just happens now to be an inversion. When we keep moving these chords, it forms the same concept, but it's moving the chord that forms the interval. So each time we do these, you can see how the structure changes. The beauty of playing these extended chords is it allows you to play in one bass concept and then use those notes for individual melodies. You can move around the whole keyboard, or on your instrument. If you're playing guitar, you could choose to stay within a couple frets, or you could find the different inversions up and down the neck and then move graciously and hopefully smoothly in between all of them. When we take away, here, let me put this one around here. When we take away a note and we have something, I'm going to just put our list of what we're doing here. When we take away a note and we just have this, we are removing this as being the major 7. The note that's in betwixt these two is a flat 7. So when I do this and we change this note value right here from being a major 7, stacking of a major third, and we now make that a minor third, we are changing the tonality from being a C major 7 to being a C minor 7, which is otherwise spelt sometimes as a C7, C dominant. You can also have it like a E diminished with a C in the bass. There are multiple names that you could put in these. The coolest concept is you just kind of flow and see which chords work well together. Now, by doing this, there's no sharps or flats in this key signature, and we can't just leave it as B. So we must signify that it's going to be a flattened note. That note is the B. Therefore, we flatten the B, and then we receive that C, E, G, and a B flat. How cool. So since we're on the topic of this, we have these extension chords that have, or extended chords, that have an extra note. The extra notes that we do don't necessarily have to be based off of the 7th scale degree, being a major 7 or a minor 7. They can also be based off of the 6th chord. A lot of times you'll hear something that maybe is like this, and then sometimes you might see something that's like a C 6, 9. That's another great possibility of a chord. That would simply mean the notes that you're using would change. Instead of having a B here, in its fashion, the 6th of the chord in the key of C is an A. Its sonority in that interval would be a minor. It's the minor 6. In fact, it's the relative minor of C major. The reason why this relative major is a cool chord, whenever you play a 1, 3, 5, and then you add the A, you would get a chord called a C major 6. If you were to move this note down, it changes to something we call a sharp 5 or an augmented chord, and it changes the tonality. And if you go up, you receive your C7 again. So really what we're looking for is this 6th note. The reason why it's super important is you could put those extensions over the top of it, like we said. If you've got C, E, G, A, and then you add the 9, in the key of C, it's going to be a D note. If we play it down here, it's only considered a major 2nd. C to D. But when we play C to D up an octave, it changes the concept when you put a whole chord behind it. If you were to play a C9 versus a C major 9, it is still the same concept that was constructed when we talked about here. So when we play this chord right here, C major 9, we are assuming that we are playing the notes that came before, the major 3rd. In the case of the C6, if we were to play that, we're not really splitting that major or minor. We're moving tertiarily. Sometimes you can view it as if you're going up to the 9 as being a 4th. Like if we're looking at it this way, we could go, well, that goes perfect 4th. C, E, G, A, and that 9 make up our C6, 9. Now, of course, there's other names for it too, but I digress. The cool thing about doing the C major 9, C7, you can use these together when trying to form concepts. So if we had something along the lines of C major, C major, C major 6, 9, interesting. We can even move these notes around. What I like to do in experimenting with chord structures that are new and fun, like our C major 9, it uses all of these triads like an E minor and then a G major. So the construction of a major 9 chord relies on kind of knowing the feeling of a C major, an E minor, and a G major. Each one of these has, in respect to each other, a feeling. If we get rid of that C, we achieve E at the bottom. We have an E minor 7. The kind of concept about going through these is you're allowed to see these through programs which are like, okay, G major, got it. E minor, got it. Play them together. Oh, well, look at that, E minor 7. So one of the great concepts about being able to play through these notes is to feel what the other notes are in the extensions. Sometimes when we find chords that are above our, let's go back to the key of C. 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 notes in the key of C major. This is considered the modus of C Ionian. It has the distance between major second, major second, minor second, major second, major second, major second, and resolution with the minor second. And before we mentioned, the shortest distances, they occur between the 3 and the 4, and between the 7 and the resolution to the 8 or the 1. Now, to understand any of our other extended notes, we have to understand a simple concept right here. And let me just lay it out in brass tacks. We use these as all the bass chords. So when we have something like a C augmented, we would be playing a chord that takes this sharp, G sharp. The purpose of this, it takes this note and it augments it up so it gives it tension. Interesting? Well, if we were to stack our chords in tertiary harmony, we would have a note like our C, E, G sharp. If we add a major third on top, we're adding 3 minor seconds, bear in mind, not 4. We would have something called a C major with a sharp 5. Now, this C major 7 is already defined by this, right? Now we have a C major 7 sharp 5. You could look at this as being an E as well, E major with a C in the bass. That's why there's so many different names for these chords that sometimes they get lost in translation. So what I would suggest in the beginning when trying to learn these is if you've already defined yourself as understanding what the foundation of music theory is. C major, when we flatten the median, we get a C minor. When we have our C minor, and then we flatten the 5, we get a C diminished. And when we have that same 1, 3, 5, but we add the sharp 5, we are now receiving this augmented chord. A lot of times when you're seeing these new chords, it's weird to hear like a diminished chord and then adding one more note. Well, this C diminished, through the eyes of music theory, relies on us being able to know what a C major is, to know what the octave is, to know that this major third, minor third, and perfect fourth form our chord arpeggiated. The practice scales that we do to get the fingerings on one scale and then to get the fingerings on multiple scales takes us to a point where when we play a chord or a structure down here and then play another note up top here, it's not necessarily the same note that is played down below. I mean, in theory, they have the same name, D. If in the key of C, you'd see it as a 2. But what we're trying to achieve here is that anytime you go past the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you start getting extended notes. Now, what I want to show you is you can use the circle of fifths to play in different keys and do this, but today we are just going to stay in the key of C. When you learn the key of C and then you learn the key of G and D in order, what happens is you notice that the scales themselves, the chords that you play, and the construction of how it feels with your fingers on the board make a lot of sense. Like when you get C and G and you're like, ooh, they're super close, no sharps and flats in the first 5 notes. Well, the first kind of couple sessions you would work on when you're starting to play piano would be like to define like a perfect fifth. And then know that a perfect fifth above is a perfect fourth below. Same notes, C and G. When we move in opposite directions, they form wonderful harmonies and notes. These gets the fingers able to do different rhythms. And this is the foundation of music. Playing through the dyads and defining what they are in sonority. These minor thirds, even though this one is a minor third, when you add the next note in the triad, it's a stacking of minor third, so you get a diminished. There is not an augmented triad in the spelling of any major key. They all have the same formula. So when we play in the key of C, we can see how playing out through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, if we call this 8, the next note would be 9. So we would have a C, 9. Now this says C major add 2, but the concept is whenever you play a chord that does not have a 7 or a 6 in it, we name it as such. You would call a chord like that a C add 9. And it would look like that. If you were playing it on a guitar, you would have your strings. You would build your note foundation. You would put the notes of your C major, and if you remember, we had C, E, G, because D, F, A, and B are not used. 1, 3, 5. When we have this, you would have your B moving to a C. You would have your A moving to a B. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. To a C. And then you would have your D moving to a E. By doing this, the open strings give you your 5, and then your E isn't really needed, but it's in there up top because you already have one here and one here. The idea here is this is our C major. What is the 9 in the key of C? Why, it's the D. Even though we view it as being the second, if we add this together, yeah, you can name a C, E, G as a C major with a add 2. Kind of makes it a sus chord if you don't call it as a 9. The way I view it, anything outside of these 7 here, just in one octave, becomes that 9. Whenever you have like a chord in here, and what we're trying to explain here is exponentially, if you keep going, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, go on forever, you know what I mean? But this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is, here, how do I spell? My bad. And then we have 9, and then we have 10, we have 11, and you know what I need to do? I need to stop doing that because these are minors. Sorry. X, I, X, and then F is a major, so we have X, I, X, I, X, I. And here's what gets interesting. We have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's the chord we've built right here. And it's much easier just to call this a C add 9. So when we do this, if we look at this C as being a note we already have, we could go C, C sharp, D. There we go. What did I fundamentally do? Why, I just changed the spelling of C, E, G to be C, E, G, and R, D. It just added the note. If we didn't want to just add the note, we would put C9. But this must include the 7th. What it looks like is this. If you have a triad and you were just thinking about building or constructing a home or a house, it would make a lot more sense if your triad had a foundation. Now here's where our 9 is. If I put this 9 chord down here, can I do this left hand? I guess I can. When we add this other 9 here, it adds something on top. But if we add the 7th, we have a really, really, really solid foundation. Now, hypothetically, it doesn't matter where you put these notes. You can put them up top or down below. So doing that is the fun of finding what your C9 is, you know, and then moving these notes around. You can call them anything you want while you're in different orders, but the truth of the matter is, when you play these chords, that major, C major, when you add that second scale degree, is a C9. The whole point or the construct behind this is to see chord construction, whether you're writing it out or you're trying to play it on your own individual instrument. The reason why this is interesting here is because when we play not a G, not a G sharp, not an 8, but we come over here and we have our notes move up to have the B. You betcha we're having a B flat. Why? We're adding in our dominant note. So when we play this, we get a C9. We have to have that foundation of the dominant note when we're playing up. If we didn't want to play that dominant note, but we wanted to still have that 9, it would be a major 9, including the note that's already in the key. That note that's already in the key was the B. So we would have Well, if we add the B, we clearly have a C9. If we sharpen that to a major third, we now have a C major 9. So we can see how the chord constructions of all these notes are contingent upon the idea of knowing what the base 7 notes are, knowing that when it gets to the 8th, it's a P8 or an octave. So this P8, everything past there gets named as such. This is a 9. We do have a 10th interval, but we don't call it a 10th interval. There aren't chords that are called 10 chords. You wouldn't have like an E major or an E minor 10. What that is, the 10, if you just go back here to your first 5, this one here is called the mediant. So in reference, the tonic, the mediant, and the dominant of the chords are the 1, 3, 5. When we go past here, yes, they still hold the kind of tone, but now they offer something different. As I aforementioned, the D namesake that we do, like wavelengths, you know, if that's a D and it's down below, the D that's up high has a very similar wavelength, but these notes in the wavelength effectively alter the way that the lower notes move or interact or vibrate. The reason why it's an interesting way to explain this is when you play a chord and it's pleasing, wherever these notes intersect each other at their peaks and their troughs, they form harmonies. If you have a chord which is in unison to itself, we call those prime, or we call those like notes or unison notes. Another great term for that is called perfect prime. When we have a perfect prime, we're just resulting in having 2 notes. Now, on a piano you can't do it, but on a ukulele you can play the same G note, open G string, our 4 string, and the 2 string, the E played at the 3rd fret makes both of the same notes. Therefore, you can have perfect prime. When we played these variations of wavelengths, the idea is you want to create wavelengths which have distance. These are the major third, minor third, stuff like that we're talking about. And by adding a 4th note in, it alters how these feel. The beauty of this is, whenever you keep going with these extensions, it alters the chords so you can hear what the chord would sound like if it had the lower notes, but utilizing how that wavelength or frequency alters the upper extended notes. So after we go through here, our 9 is used a lot. We don't use the 10. We don't use the 14. It ends at our 13. So when we have X, I, we get 10, 11, 12, 13. If we wanted to make this a 13 chord, we would just move our notes up. Well, what is the 13th in the key of C? This is our octave 8, 9, 11, 13. The fact that we have an A up here and not down here changes a couple things. We don't have a C6, which we could call C, E, and G, and an A as C6. But then we have a B. That B kind of cancels out the concept of having the 6 because we're utilizing the 7th as that mortar, that foundation, that tie together. So when we represent this as C13, we are absolutely talking about having the natural B, which is our 7, and then our extensions extend past that. And yes, you include the notes that are the 9, and then the 11, then the 13. Each extension past what it is gives a little bit more flavor. Well, let's take a look at that on the piano. When we're playing our notes of a C major, we add the major 7th, add the major 9. Watch what happens when we hit the 11. We get this kind of D minor 9 kind of shape or function. That's because the computer that would read it out of having a B diminished and then having a E minor and then having a C on the bottom allows us to see how these are all shaped by tertiary harmonies. One of the most common chords that we have in music is called the C major 9 with a sharp 11. The meaning is, the reason why this chord right here, aforementioned, has that minor 9 in there is, watch this. This note right here is in correlation to this note down here. Well, these 2 notes make a dissonance. Therefore, we don't often have our C, E, G, B, D, and then F without removing maybe this one and getting a C major 9 sus4 We also could do that the other way, having the 2. But the most common chord that we would use would be adding a sharp 11. A C major 9 sharp 11, when you have no third, or whether you have a third, defines a very super jazzy, very, very melodic chord. And again, you can move these notes anywhere you want. But as we said, when you play something in a different octave, when you have a chord that's built off of a major, you can also play the major and then substitute out your major for your minor. A C major 7, when we flatten the third, gives us the tertiary spelling of a minor third, a major third, and a major third, giving us beautiful chord, eh? C minor major 7. Now these are found in many, many chords, like our natural minor when we add a 7th and we change it to like a harmonic minor, we find ourselves being able to play. Like in the key of B flat. B flat would have a G minor. That's the relative minor. Each one of these chords would have a G minor, A diminished, B flat major, C minor, D minor, E flat major, F, what do we do? F major, and then, oh, I don't need the 9 there. and then the G again. What happens is when you change that F note to be an F sharp, you have now altered all the notes that are in the key of B flat major or G minor. That thusly changes all of our triads that had an F in it. So our G stays the same. Whenever we go to our next chord, we would still have an A diminished, and then we're going to be moving to our B flat major. But notice how there's B flat, D, and then F. Well, now alter it by augmenting it, and you get a B flat augmented. Hear how that changes just the beginning? It gives a little bit more tension and release to it. Now, the next chord is a C, E flat, G. This is our, right? Just a C minor, no matter how you want to play that inversion. The next chord would have been a D minor, but now we have an F sharp, so it's a D major. No matter how you want to play that again. Go on, just. We do still have the E flat major. Beautiful. Our next chord skips the F and goes to the F diminished, because now we still have the root chords of F, A, C, but now it's not an F, it's an F sharp, which gives us a 1 flat 3 flat 5. And then it resolves to the G minor again. Gorgeous chords out of the B flat. If you're not a fan of B flat, I would suggest trying to play it. So back to C. If we're going to be doing these chords in a major, we can minor it. As soon as you keep adding on extensions, you find that you still have the same namesake. So C major 9, C minor 9 are super, super common chord. They look very, very similar. They only have the difference of that minor third, major third. Here's where it gets fun. That C major with that 11 there, it's kind of horrible to hear and you hear it first time. Either one, adding the 11 or putting the major in there. We talked about how the sharp 11 sounds really kind of cool. Well, when you play a minor now, it still feels a little clustered. This one is a non-chord because the tone we were actually looking for was that note that we did not utilize earlier. So the C minor 9 with the add-on of the 11 feels cool. This is such a super jazzy chord. Can't help but play. Going back up to the board just to realize that anytime you add these extensions and you move something over the top of it, we are generating a new way to add on a note. So what I would suggest To anybody that's trying to learn chord extensions just for the first time, you pick a key, you kind of write it all out. You view it as having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 13 possibilities. You get rid of the possibilities that just aren't really a thing. We don't do 10s and 12s there. Figure out that this one's called the tonic. This one, we've got the subtonic, it's right next to it. We've got our mediant. This one's called the subdominant. Next to it we have the dominant, holds all the tension. This one's the submediant. That one's a whole different explanation in and of itself. The seventh, when we do this one, it's called the lending or the leading tone. The idea is that note, when you play do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that seventh wants to go directly back to that one and do a resolution. If it doesn't, it feels weird to go back. Like if you're doing something like... it feels weird to not go to the C again. Like it's unresolved. The ear wants it to go back to something that feels stable and grounded in a consonant chord construction. Our eighth is the octave. Our 9 is going to be what we would consider the major second, but now it's the extended, so we have it as being an upper extended voicing. Upper extended voicing. This is an upper extended voicing and upper extended voicing. What happens when we do the 9, 11, and 13? The chord construction, it alters and changes. So if we wanted to make, like, let's say a C, how about this? C minor 9, sharp 11. We would have C minor, so we would know, viewing all music through the eyes of the major, that we flatten the median. We want to go all the way up to have the 11, and we know that when we play the 9, this note, that we're going to need to have this note in between, the B flat, because anything that goes up past our triad, unless it's an add chord, needs to have this 7. If we have the major 7, it makes this a different chord. It gives us our major 7 construction that has a G major over the top of a C minor. No bueno. We want a G minor over the top of a C minor. Most absolutely. And then the extension to have the 11, we know if we just added the F, that we would be adding the 11 and having that tone, but that's not the tone we want for this particular chord. Although it's beautiful, we want to have the tension that is built off the top of that 11. So when we build our chord construction, right, that is going to be our 11 extension. We can do a 13 over the top of it for a C minor 9 with the 11, and you can even add that sharp 11 in there with that 13. 9, sharp 11, 13. The beauty of these chords is once you start seeing that the notes that we play up here alter and affect the chords or triads down here, it changes the way that we view music just a little bit. Kind of like when we play a C, E, and then a G sharp, we've got our C augmented. Well, if we add on an extension of a C, we have our C augmented as it is, but what happens when we drop this B right in here? We get our sharp 5, and then we get this C7 sharp 5 kind of chord. So the beauty of this is you can move around the keyboard and hear different chords in their major with an extension, whether it's major 7, minor 7. You can do 6 like a C6. You can use that 6 as a 13, but then when you do that, no matter where you play it, if you don't put your note that goes in between them, that 7, that flat 7 to be exact, you alter the note. So a C major 13 with no 9, what the result is this. That's a big old octave. It has a dissonance. Fun? So when we have C major 9, adding that note in gives us a C major 9 with a 13 as our other extended notes, our other upper extension notes. Now, it goes without saying, if you add any of these extension notes below where your prime is, that just becomes an inversion of said chord. The way to name those and the way to analyze those is still through the idea of using our 1, 3, and 5 for our major chord construction. But at that point, we would start utilizing our Roman numeral system to say root position, inversion, inversion, and then when you go into having the 7s, you have a third inversion. That third inversion will be what you would be analyzing here, but I don't want to go into Roman numerals right now. I just want to leave us with the base idea that those do work quite well with having chord charts and being able to go through these. Another thing that we kind of talked on, and this is what I want to leave us on, is now that you have this idea on how to build a chord past 3 notes, adding 1 note, you understand the purpose of what the 6th and the 7th are. They act as little foundationals. 1, 3, 5 is going to be our root of 1, 3, 5. This is what our chord construction looks like. When we add a 6th and then another note like the 9, you can even move it up. I mean, watch what happens when you have a 6th chord and then you add this 9 in. You get your, of course, your add 9. Well, what about your 13 again? It doesn't really alter because you've got your 6, 9 here now. And that is the same essential chord, you're just not doing the upper extension. If you put this note down here, what a gorgeous chord, you know? So 6, 9 is also called E minor, I think, E minor 7. There it is. Nice. One of the things that is interesting about this computer program, it puts 4 chords on minor chords. Just to be clear, you do not call any minor chord a sus. Sus chords are only reserved for major chords. It's when you replace the 3 for the 4. This is called a C sus. When you replace this and you put the 2, which is the D, you would have a C2 or a C add 2. Or you would have a C sus 2. Many programs call it a couple different things. The only thing you want to really look for is that you're not utilizing the 3 and the 2 together. When you use the 3 and the 2 together, it kind of makes a cluster. Same thing, but listen to the difference. You can even add that note to the upper extension, of course, giving us 1. See how it adds that 2? But that's the whole construct of it. Getting familiar with what you're playing with. And I gotta say, today is the first time that I've ever used the Chordy app that I bought years ago. I saw it on a website. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I used it once to play through guitar chords, and I noticed it was giving extensions that seemed a little weird and shaky. But now that I've looked at music theory kind of extensively, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You can name anything you want. As long as you tortured the data long enough, you could get anything you want. So when going through here, we realize that it makes sense to add our 7th or our 6 if we're going up. You can put this up here and call it a 6, but it is definitely a 13. The only other extended chords we use besides a 9 would be a sharp 11. I should draw that the other way. Sharp 11. We have a flat 9 and we have a sharp 9, but that sharp 9 doesn't really change much because what we talked about in most cases, that'll just move on to having another note. If we have this 1, 2, 3, and we've got this 9 note, we add our flat 7th and do a sharp 9. It becomes a C7 with a sharp 9. Really funky, huh? Try and do this one with the sharp 9 and sharp 11. Yeah! C7 sharp 11. See how the more of these extensions you add, the dirtier it gets? Adding that 13, good God! So, I hope everybody who has watched this has had a little bit more time to process what these are. You can go through these sharp 9, sharp 11, 11. What happens when you get the 13? Let's take a gander. 1, 2, 3. Here's our 7. We're going to add the 9. We have our 13 right here. What happens if we just add that sharp 13 here? Oh, we just have our C7. Ta-da! If we add it up here, of course. If we put this note down here, watch how it happens when I put the 9 in there. This is a C9 still because the sharp 13 is nothing more than playing through the notes. You would have to utilize the notes of just the A in the key of C. So sharp 13, not really. It's not something that we're using here. The kind of concept is you want to keep this one right there. Ooh, you can see how we have a flat 13 though. What do you think about that? Yuck. If I had to look at that, I probably wouldn't call that a C7, C9 with a flat 13. You could have a sharp 11. And that just gets convoluted because if you... How do I explain this? When playing chords like this, the 11 is kind of assumed at this point. Generally in music, if you're playing something and it feels a little bit too smooshed together, too clustered, you could omit the 5th because the 5th is implied through most music. When you play multiple chords, polychord structures over the top of each other, the 5th gets lost. The other thing you could do is because when you're adding an 11, that 11, if you look at it through the eyes of, well, our 11 goes up here, right? We have our 10, 11. If we're going through seeing 9, 10, 11, we would have the same note being the 4. Well, these are our half steps. So when you play a C major and you've got that F over the top, it causes dissonance. But as we aforementioned, the wavelength that we're using that causes that dissonance effectively changes the way the consonants feel due to something called the overtone series. So the overtone series is just a system of where the notes that we play when we play them in root position, intervals, triads, as long as they're those 3 notes, they resonate everything else on the instrument, in the music hall, all the other instruments playing together. Cool. I do hope that this idea of chord construction can help you get to a place where you understand all the different types of chords. So, having said that, if we were to go through all the different types of chords, you can see yourself putting down a C major. Oh, I got a student coming up. C major, you can add the major 7th. You know what the dominant is, so you get a C7. You know that if you move it down to a double flat, it creates a C6. That C6, when we flatten that 6 again, it really doesn't do anything except for call this an augmented note on your C. So when you have the C augmented, just adding this dissonance, it doesn't really alter anything, but we can name any chord anything. I think this would be called like an A flat, maybe? A flat major, sharp 5, yeah, sure. Works right. So the idea is if you do an extension note past this 6, you're not going to do an extension note of the 7. That would make a 13. Just because you're not playing it all the way up here doesn't mean that these 2 notes aren't a C major 13. You just have omitted now the 9th of the chord. But when you put the 9th back in, you get this nice full and vibrant chord. If you want to omit the 3rd down here and play that same thing, it just lessens a little bit of the tension. You would also call it another chord if you wanted to. You can see it through the eyes of having like an A minor. And then instead of having just your A minor 7, there is no 8, we have a 9. So hypothetically, if we played an A minor 9, we would have a G major 9, which is why chord construction and analyzation allows you to view how chords have multiple different names. And I guess it just depends on what you're writing and how you're writing and for what instrument, how you would like to name these pieces. I generally try to stay diatonically, meaning if I'm going to be playing something like a C major, but I'm playing an A minor, and I'm using a C over the top, I would definitely call this an A minor 7. But as soon as I change any of my values, I can see how I'd be shifting down to an A flat, but I would also, as I just aforementioned, call this like the C9 with a flat sharp 11. You can call C major 7, add the 5 there, flat 5. That's kind of cool, very jazzy. But again, all these chords come about knowing the root and then seeing it not only through the eyes of the major, like a C major 9, but seeing it as a minor 9. When we start playing these notes, what we can do is play chord comps. Once you have a mechanism to hear that kind of melody, you can play around with the chord of natural minor. If you know some of your scales, watching these chord structures. I hope they lead to you being able to use more extension chords in your own playing. And remember, if you play real slow, you look at it on the board, you take all this in context and you say, oh, I know now that my extension chords consist of just these. There is no 10, there is no 12. I mean, hypothetically, they do exist, but they are not utilized as far as namesake. If you were to see something on the staff, and even if you were to have a different key signature, please don't be terrified by these. Let's just do treble clef. If you're going to do an extension chord, let's say we're doing it in the key of G. It would change all of our values here. You would just move G. You'd have G as your octave here. Oops. And then the chord right before it would be your F. All the other values stay the same. G, A, B, C, D. There is no 14th. There's just the 13th. So our sixth of the chord, which would be here, is our 13. If we wanted to have a G major 13, how would we construct it? We would look at our G as being our root. We would say, cool, we're going to put one note here. We're going to play our chord structure. Let's just put it in root form. That's our triad. Gives us our major third. Gives us our minor third. And then after that, because this is a major symbol, we would put our 7. Our 7 is on the top line of the treble clef. And there's no need to put an accidental, whether it's a sharp, flat, double flat, flat. It already has a sharp in the key signature. So we've now got G, G, B, D, and F sharp. And what we're looking for is the extension of the 13. So what's the 13 in the key of G? You can either memorize E is a 6, and it's also the 13, and then drop that hot puppy up here. And when you go play this, you can see the F. After F, we have, count them up maybe, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. There's our line, F, G, A, B, C, D. Look at that, folks. When you look at this, you're going to see yourself going up. And if you count out an octave from F to F, you would see F, G, A, B, C, D, E. You would know that this note is an F. And the reason why you would see this written all over the place, 3 ledger lines above and then the note on top, you associate that's the F. So, what we have here is our spelling. Let's go over to the piano, and this is what we're going to leave you on. If you play a root, a third, a fifth, you've got your major 7, and then you can see yourself going to the extension note of your 13. You can find yourself playing a G major 13. The only other 2 notes you would be missing after this, after your 7 chord, would be your 9, which would be your A, and then you can also have your 11. Now, in the case of the majors, you have the clashing notes, so a lot of times you would omit that 11 when playing your 13 out, or you would just have the 11 being signified by being up there with the, what do we have there? The C? Sure, it's our 4. What do you think about that note? I think it's hollow. Let's sharpen that. I think that's jazzy. So chord construction isn't really that hard. I hope this demystified how to look at a chord, how to write it out, and then how to view or realize that you could even put in the notes that wanted to be inside of there. If you had the 9, you would know then you have your C and your A. And then what happens is you associate this as being an A minor. You would do the D, F sharp, and A as being a D major. You would do the G, B, and the D as being a G major. At that point, you would analyze being able to do natural minor, unless you're going to alter any of these notes to do either melodic minor or harmonic minor, depending on what your melody is. Your D major would allow you to do Ionian. You would take a look at both of these chords to see where that 4th resolves. D, E, F sharp, G sharp. No, doesn't work. Yes, does work, but only if A minor has a harmonic minor. That means that the D do is still G sharp to A here. So you would have that 1 note difference allows you to play Lydian in the key of D, but we're not going to go that far. I would just keep it here. You could also do your pentatonics here, pentatonics, and then G major, of course, pentatonics. That gives us the idea of what's the relative. Well, C major pentatonic, D major has B minor pentatonic, and G major has E minor pentatonic. So, right there through chord analyzation, playing chords, putting extended notes, and then knowing what type of modus or scale to play over the top is the next step in seeing chord extensions. So if this was all blah, 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 that's okay. That's what it starts off in the beginning. The idea is to start watching stuff like this. Check out my YouTube channel. There's a whole bunch of stuff on here, 9,000 something videos. I do appreciate all the subs that have made this channel possible. And then go check out any other resource you possibly can. And here's the disclaimer. Not everybody's right about anything. I could be wrong on some things here. Bring it to my attention. I'd like to know what I missed, what I got right, and then I could formulate a better way to communicate this to others. The idea here is it is always a step forward, not a step backwards. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, subscribe, put something cool in the comment section, and I will be with you next week. Next week, we're going to be doing, I think, pentatonics. How funny we end on that. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 for the major, and then 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7 for the minors. We're going to explain all of this next week. Aloha. Oh, we explain it on Tuesdays. Bye.